He's maybe better at some things, but he's not better in every area. I'll be excited to see the disappointment on his face after he gets out.
I was not joking. So, you thought it was a joke? No, it's not a joke.
Lando Norris shattered the privilege line by calling out the golden boy of this F1 era, and let's just say, after Max's brutal comeback, Lando might be somewhere crying into his helmet.
Clearly the car looks pretty difficult.
Sure, McLaren's sitting on the fastest, cleanest car right now. No one's denying that. But seriously, if you're winning for 5 minutes and acting like greatness only belongs to you, someone's got to check you.
Interview that is not going to happen anyway, so there is no need to speculate about it.
And don't worry, Max Verstappen didn't just check him. He torched him so bad that even the fans are out here cheering for the takedown.
Verstappen was to step into the Red Bull, he would get out disappointed, and then Verstappen goes top, and Verstappen's lap looked okay. I mean, watching his onboards, a couple of tricky moments, but it didn't really seem like it was especially fast. It's just, it was purple, wow, it must be fast. But it didn't, like, the onboards didn't exactly look spectacular.
So, after practice in Bahrain, Max boldly claimed that if he ever stepped into McLaren's car, he would be so fast that nobody would even see him. Disappear into the distance. That's how confident he was. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't lighthearted banter. Max meant it.
So this is apparently the car that Max would be disappointed to drive. Let's be real for just a couple of seconds here.
Lando Norris didn't take that lying down. Instead of brushing it off, he clapped back hard. Lando said Max would actually step out of the McLaren disappointed, not victorious. It was a sharp answer, the kind that cuts right through the usual polite racing talk.
Now, Max was getting into it after the Japanese Grand Prix. He was asked the question about the McLaren. If you were in the McLaren, how would it have been today? And he said, I'd have been way up the road, you wouldn't have even seen me. Then people said, yes, Al, were you just joking about that? And Max says, did I stutter?
And Max? He didn't backtrack or soften his words. He shot back with just 3 words. Did I stutter? If there was ever any doubt about the seriousness of his original comment, that ended it.
You thought it was a joke? I'll give you an honest answer. I also said in that same interview that it wasn't going to happen anyway, right? As in getting in the McLaren. So, Lando, as his, media brilliance really.
What started as a casual press room jab quickly blew up into something much bigger. This wasn't 2 drivers casually sparring. This was personal. Lando had hit the one spot that Max guards the most. His pride.
This was in your car. He says that he'd be driving off into the sunset. What do you think about that? And of course, there's no good answer to this from Lando, but certainly his answer raised some eyebrows. So he said the following: I would love for him to come and test our car.
Now he said so because Lando might not know. Max Verstappen isn't just any driver. He's the reigning king of Formula One, a serial world champion who built a career on crushing competition. When Lando hinted that Max might not be able to handle McLaren's car as easily as he thought, it wasn't just an insult to his driving skills. It was a direct hit at his whole legacy. The fallout was immediate. Fans divided into camps.
It's impossible for Lando to answer this question well. I mean, maybe he should just not have answered it. But, his answer just, raised questions, didn't it, once again? Especially when the McLaren is clearly the best car. Because the argument that Norris is trying to make is that the reason why McLaren are currently leading the championships is because of the great drivers that they have.
Some backed Max, saying he had every right to be confident after years of dominance. Others loved Lando's boldness, finally seeing someone stand up to Verstappen's usual swagger. In the media, the headlines practically wrote themselves. Civil war brewing? Max and Lando feud erupts? It was clear this wasn't going to fizzle out quietly. These two weren't just fighting for pride anymore, Bab. They were fighting for the future image of Formula One.
Is because of the car, and I don't think there's anyone right now in Formula One who is really going to deny that. So let's talk about practice. Thought this is pretty cool to see the cooling levels on the new Ferrari compared to what they were back in Japan.
But this drama didn't pop out of nowhere. The reason Max even made that comment hints at something deeper. Pure frustration. Right now, McLaren isn't just fast. They're a nightmare for everyone else on the grid, including Red Bull. At Bahrain, McLaren didn't just show up. They tore the place apart, especially in the middle sector of the track. The most technical and difficult part, McLaren's cars were untouchable. They were gaining 0.7 of a second on Red Bull. In Formula One, that's not a small gap. That's a slap across the face.
But he has no idea what to do yet anyway. He can't just follow Max's setups because they're Max's setups and they're not really built for, a driver that doesn't have the preferences that Max has.
Even more brutal for Red Bull fans, it wasn't just Lando making McLaren look good. Oscar Piastri, Lando's younger teammate who was a rookie last year, was right there matching and even beating him in some runs. If a second-year driver could step into McLaren and start flying like that, it sent one clear message. This wasn't about some magical driving skill. This was about the machine under them. McLaren had built a monster, and it wasn't just fast on the stopwatch. It was consistent over laps. It didn't eat its tires like Red Bull's RB21. It didn't twitch and slide all over the place. It was stable, controlled, and brutal in race pace. Meanwhile, Red Bull drivers were sweating just trying to keep their cars pointed in the right direction. Red Bull's traditional advantage, crushing everyone with straight-line speed and dominant corner exits, wasn't enough here. The McLaren didn't care. It rolled through the technical parts with ridiculous ease, while Red Bull drivers scrambled to stay clean on a lap.
Excited to see the disappointment on his face after he gets out. So, the tricky thing for Lando is, with comments like this, is that it's impossible to win.
Lando Norris didn't just take a shot at Max Verstappen. Without realizing it, he also fired a shot straight into his own garage. When Lando joked that Max would be disappointed after driving the McLaren, it didn't just sound like a jab at Max's skills. It made it seem like McLaren's car. The same car leading both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships in 2025 wasn't good enough.
Maybe disrespect Max's talent and ability. Lando, as talented as he is, he's not a 4-time world champion, right? And Max has done that on a consecutive basis, and clearly for very good reason indeed. So either you're downplaying Max's talent and saying, yeah, if he drove the McLaren, he wouldn't be able to do any better of a job than I'm currently able to do.
At a time when McLaren had every reason to ride a wave of confidence, Lando's comment risked shattering that image. In Formula One, car performance is about more than just engineering. It's about the team's belief in the project. Mechanics, engineers, designers, they all spend thousands of hours building a machine capable of winning titles. Publicly calling that machine disappointing, even as a joke, undermines the entire effort. And the timing couldn't have been worse.
To the engineers, at least this was how I would feel if I was an engineer. Like if I'm an engineer, maybe I don't care, but if I'm an engineer and I'm hearing Lando say that my car would be disappointing to Max, this is a car that is currently leading the World Constructors' Championship, a car that is leading the World Drivers' Championship, a car that is the successor.
McLaren's 2020 resurgence was still fresh. They hadn't yet proven their dominance across a full season. After a few brilliant performances, Bahrain included, the McLaren was being called the car to beat by outlets like motorsport.com on April 5th, 2020. But one track doesn't define a year. Critics pointed out that Lando's dig could age horribly if McLaren's performance dipped later in the season, especially with teams like Mercedes and Ferrari working on mid-season upgrades.
And Lando's out here saying, yeah, Max would be super disappointed. I'm sure he's like semi-joking, I don't know. But, Max would be disappointed if he got out of our car because our car's, a disappointment. It's tricky to drive. Lando comes into this weekend saying, yeah, the car's a bit tricky. It's going to be problematic this weekend. It's not going to be so easy.
The real risk wasn't just public relations. It was the possibility that Max could turn the tables. If Verstappen ever got a chance to test McLaren's machinery and performed better than Lando and Oscar Piastri, the fallout would be brutal. Lando's joke would become evidence against him. It would suggest he wasn't extracting the maximum from a championship-winning car, and worse, that he underestimated what Max could actually do.
Most certainly the fastest. So, and many people are also looking at this and saying, well, what if Max did come and drive the car? What if Zach Brown said, you know what, Max, you want to do a test in the McLaren? Feel free, you can come and drive our machine. Now, they would never do this, but imagine that it happens, and then Max, is obviously flying, potentially, and he's like, you know what, Lando, we think Oscar's the man for the job.
Stack that against who Lando was targeting. a driver who has crushed the last 4 championships without mercy. Max Verstappen isn't someone you casually dismiss. Since 2020, Max has broken records for consecutive wins and pole positions. In 2020, he clinched the title with 6 races to spare. Calling him out, even indirectly, was inviting a firestorm from fans, analysts, and even team bosses who respect results over banter.
Sure, they're all not easy to drive. I think that even Red Bull said that. But yeah, the McLaren doesn't look the easiest car to drive, but it is most certainly the fastest. So, and many people are also looking at this and saying, well...
Inside McLaren, the engineers were caught off guard. According to Sky F1's paddock reporter, Lando's disappointment comment created unease during Friday's post-practice debrief at Bahrain. Team principal Andrea Stella was said to have downplayed it in public but addressed it internally, reminding drivers that public remarks reflect the entire organization, not just personal rivalries. For a team that had finally built a car capable of fighting at the front, a car that gained 7/10 over Red Bull in Sector 2 at Bahrain, the last thing they needed was headlines about their drivers calling it a letdown.
Second in the final sector. So it's not like Hamilton and Ferrari didn't have the pace at times, but they simply couldn't put together a full lap like McLaren did, and that was...
While Lando's bravado drew cheers from some fans tired of Max's dominance, the insiders knew better. In Formula One, comments like that don't disappear. They hang over a team's head, especially if results slip later. And with upgrades constantly reshuffling the pecking order, no one can afford to act like a season is wrapped up after 3 races. If McLaren stumbles, Lando's words will be the first thing critics throw back at him. While McLaren was dealing with unexpected PR headaches, Red Bull was drowning in a silent crisis of their own.
Tsunoda was talking a lot about the throttle not reacting well. He was also talking, well, certainly Max later on, about the brakes not reacting well. So, difficult day for the drivability of the RB21.
The RB21, Red Bull's latest challenger, turned out to be a nightmare for anyone not named Max Verstappen. Unlike previous years, where Red Bull's cars were dominant and accessible, the RB21 demanded a driving style only Max could survive. In the Bahrain post-practice interviews on March 8th, 2025, Yuki Tsunoda, Red Bull's junior driver, openly admitted that copying Max's car setups was impossible for him. Tsunoda's struggles weren't unique. Rookie drivers coming into the Red Bull system over the last 2 seasons have consistently failed to adapt. Liam Lawson, after filling in for an injured Daniel Ricciardo in 2020, also struggled to stay consistent when given Max's baseline setups. Ricciardo himself later said in an interview with Racing News, 365, on November 12, 2024, that Red Bull's car philosophy had evolved so specifically toward Max's style that it alienated nearly every other driver.
Probably the most unrepresentative practice session you're ever really gonna see. So,
the problem goes deeper than just car setups. Red Bull's entire team environment is structured around Verstappen's preferences. Since Max's meteoric rise after joining the team in 2016 and winning his first race in Spain, the engineering, design, and even strategy departments have slowly revolved around optimizing Max's comfort. That worked beautifully when Max was dominating. But now, it's trapping the team. Newcomers don't get the same advantage Max had when he arrived. When Max first joined Red Bull, he leaned heavily on Daniel Ricciardo's experience and car setups. Ricciardo's style was smoother and less aggressive, which gave Max a stable platform to build from. By 2017, Max had enough data and confidence to start pushing the car toward his extreme style play. Sharp turn-ins, heavy rear-end rotation, and a preference for unstable entries.
it just feels so tricky when I drive it. And the tricky thing that Tsunoda has to deal with is that when Max first joined Red Bull, he would just copy Ricciardo's setups, and that helped him, get a competent setup in the car that he could use and drive and, eventually understand what he wanted to do and to change.
Now, there's no Daniel Ricciardo figure to balance things. New drivers are thrown into a car designed by Max for Max, and when they can't drive it perfectly, they fall behind, or crash out entirely. Tsunoda's complaints after Bahrain weren't just personal gripes. They exposed a system built around one driver to the point of self-sabotage. Even veteran engineers have struggled to translate Max's feedback into something usable for others. The RB21 demands absolute precision, and even a small mistake means a huge loss in lap time, or worse, a spin. At a time when McLaren's car allows both Norris and Piastri to thrive, Red Bull's one-man machine looks more vulnerable than ever. That's what the world thinks. But what about you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.